Everyone, my name is Jessica Smith. I am the Membership Services Manager with SABR, and I'm here to introduce Kat Williams for our next session. She's going to talk a little bit about a League of Our Own television series and its history. And you guys have been doing a great job, but just as a reminder, questions in the chat and we will answer them if we have time. So Kat, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Listen, I want to share it. Do you have it where I can share my screen? Yeah, I'm having trouble.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
I
should
think
be able
only
to now.
Leslie can do that.
Yeah, she should be able to now.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a co-host now, Kat.
Okay. Let me see if I can do that. Hang on one second. It doesn't appear to be there. Okay, well, I can't seem to find the link for some reason.
Do you have it already open on your computer?
I did, yeah, and for some reason it's not.
Sometimes I notice that if I have a lot of windows open, I have to scroll down to see all the windows that are open.
Right. Well, I don't want to take up too much time. It's actually, it was a clip. Leslie, if you happen to have it, if it comes, if you could, I sent it.
The one you sent me? Yeah, I got it. Yeah, no problem. I can show it.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Amazon Prime series, League of Their Own. And what you're about to see here is just a 2-minute official trailer, just because I want to get everybody in the mood for this. So thank you for doing that, Leslie.
There's another one on Tuesday.
Tuesday's too late, sir.
Do not approach the train.
Let it happen. I'm in.
Ticket, please.
About that. Hey, you.
You're clearly going to tryouts.
She doesn't look like that much competition.
I could be competition, I think. Oh. We're here for the tryouts.
I don't think you understand. This is the All-American League.
We're pretty all-American. Who was that?
Showing that knuckleball.
They didn't even let me try out, Dad.
Maxine, you've got to make some smarter choices.
This is fun.
This is something I can work with.
Teachers, I'd like to go through a few rules. Curfew is at 10 p.m. sharp. No smoking or drinking. No pants.
What?
I'm a pitcher, and you need me.
Is that so? Everybody on the team has to have a job at the factory.
So any job?
Max, can you lift 50 pounds? And are you willing to get the shit burned out of your hands?
Yes, and I guess so.
Great.
If you want the game to be more exciting, shorten the skirts.
What the hell are you doing?
I thought that you would catch it.
My back turned?
This is our one shot.
So what if right here, right now, we forget the rules?
They don't get to decide if this is real or not. We do.
Let's go!
Things are changing pretty fast.
Hey, Dollface.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, if you haven't seen the new Amazon Prime series, hopefully that will get you in the mood to go see it. I know Leslie asked you guys briefly last night how many of you had seen any of it. If you could, again, use your little yellow hand and just let me know how many of you have seen even part of it. Excellent. Excellent. I love it. I love it. Keep it coming. If you haven't seen it, then please do. Leslie and I are talking about this, and I said, I really think the show is so wonderful, but it's getting, people are asking a lot of questions about it. And many who have watched the new Amazon Prime series, and I get a lot of different reactions from people about it, but many people either ask nicely, but, little hand wringing and with a bit of shock. Is all that true? Did all that really happen? Or they're really angry and they announce, no, that is not real. That did not happen. There were no lesbians in the 1940s. Well, and those folks rarely even mention the race issue. The people who do often will say, and I'm talking now about the people who are not so happy about the show, they will say something to the effect of, well, they had the Negro Leagues, or, what difference does it make because, did that many Black women really play baseball or care about baseball? Well, in either case, folks question the historical accuracy of the stories being told by the TV show, in part because, of course, the movie was so beloved and by me. And so that's what people are invested in. They're invested in that story. And I am often, again, not certainly by everyone who talks to me about the show, but a lot of people question it. And I kept thinking about, and even as early as this morning, I thought, how am I going to start talking about this? Well, I have on my Peaches shirt, which I have about 75 of them. So there's a good chance I'll always have it on. So this morning I walked across the street from the hotel here in Rockford, and I went to Starbucks, as I often do, and I'm sitting there, and this couple walked up to me and said, oh, you have a Peaches shirt on. We love the Peaches, we love it. And we love that movie, but we heard that, now they're making this other show, and I find it disgusting. And I thought, oh man, do I have to start today like this? But I was very diplomatic. Some of you will find that hard to believe, but it's true. And I just said, I think it's just a different perspective. It's a different way of looking at things. And this conversation went on. They would not leave it. The race stuff is just, of course, there was discrimination against Black people, but this homosexuality stuff, I just find that disgusting. And now they want to teach it to our kids in school. And I thought, where are we going with this? I very nicely said to them, well, that stuff is real. That's real. It was real in the 1940s, and it's real today. And it makes people uncomfortable because for a lot of years, it was not okay to even talk about it. And so I sat there after they left, and I thought, well, this kind of ties the things I want to talk about today together very nicely. So I thought, well, how do I want to go from that story? How do I want to get into this discussion? Well, as a history professor, and one that specializes in and loves that period, that mid-20th century period of World War II, I promise you I will refrain from giving a lecture on the historical significance of World War II and the impact on social and cultural issues in the US. But what I want to do is focus on those two issues that the TV show really takes on: sexuality and race. As a historian, I am constant. If someone says, oh, what do you do? Well, I'm a history professor. 90% of the time, what I get from people is, oh, I hated history. It's like, geez. And so, they always go on to say something like, oh, that memorization, dates, none of that stuff really matters to me anyway. And my students tell me that as well. And what I always say to them is, yeah, that's not really history. That's just memorizing a bunch of stuff. And that's not what history is. History is when we start to peel back the layers and look at the people or how an event affected them. And believe me, everyone has a different relationship with every single event and time period. It's all about perspective. It's all about where we start, our place and our experiences in the world. When we watched A League of Their Own, the movie in 1992, we were amazed, inspired, angry, and relieved that finally we were being told this history. Few of us who are white questioned the whiteness of the story. And those of us who are queer smiled knowingly, but accepted the fact that that part of the story wasn't going to be told because it never was. And in 1992, it simply couldn't be on the big screen. Penny Marshall did what she could in a couple of episodes, in a couple of scenes in the movie where the African-American woman catches the ball, for example. It was a nod toward the racial discrimination. She steered clear of the sexuality issues, of course. But for those of us who were fortunate enough to see even part of ourselves in that movie, it was groundbreaking. It was life-altering. Then we fast forward to the 21st century. Issues of sexuality and race and racial discrimination is more openly discussed. I am in no way suggesting it is a free discussion or that things have changed to the point where everybody's equal and happy, but we talk about it a little more. So Will Graham and Abby Jacobson, and let me just be clear, I am not speaking for them. This is my interpretation of them and of their process and their wish to do this show. They sit down and they say, wait a minute, this movie was fantastic, but there are other stories. There are different ways of looking at that. So they said to themselves, well, maybe if we dig beyond what Penny Marshall was able to do in 1992, what if we dig below the surface of the league? Look at the different perspectives and really tell the stories. And what are the stories? Surely there were queer women, and where are the women of color? What was life like for them? And why did baseball matter that much? Well, it's a sport, right? And people who maybe don't quite get the connection are going to say things like, well, you know, it's a sport. They like to play the game, but is that really a tie? Is that a connection that we really need to look at? Yes, of course it is. And so when they started to strip away some of the layers, when they started to look at things that were a little different, what they started to do was really look at what was the experience of those women. What was the experience? What are the questions that we can answer that Penny Marshall simply couldn't? There was only so much that she was going to be able to put onto the big screen in 1992. So by asking different questions, by looking at things that are below the surface, by exploring different perspectives, the Amazon Prime TV show gives us a multi-layered view of not just that movie, but of 1940s, mid-America, of gender dynamics, of racial issues, issues of sexuality. They ask questions about why? Not why is there racism or why is there sexism? Sadly, we've written volumes on that and still haven't changed it much. But why here and now? Why baseball? Well, 1940s America was pretty much a white man's world. And baseball was definitely a white man's game. Now, that did not mean that men and women of color and white women didn't play the game. As I have said many, many times, women have always been part of the game of baseball, always. We've always been there. We've played and umpired and tended the fields and done all of those things. We've always been there. Not professionally so much, and maybe not in a really visible way, but we've been there. So again, asking the question, so what? What happened? Why did it matter? Well, it mattered because of that history, of the historical context of the 1940s. We all know the horrific stories of racial discrimination in the 40s, in the mid 20th century. We all know the stories of Jim Crow. You know, we sometimes if people think about Jim Crow at all, they think about it as a much earlier thing that happened, and then, you know, we got over that. And that's just simply not true. In fact, I would argue we're probably still in the midst of it. But Jim Crow is a system of laws and customs that kept African Americans completely segregated, as the quote says, from the cradle to the grave. Yeah, that meant baseball. That meant baseball fields. And in some states, it was illegal for Black kids to play on the same field as white kids, even if the white kids weren't there. There was always that discrimination. But that didn't mean that people of color didn't still play the game. We all know they did. And as we get into the 1940s, with the beginning of World War II, Black women and Black men were still playing the game. Now, the one thing that you probably know, and if you don't, I think it's important to, is that the character of Max in the TV show, played by Shantae Adams, who is fantastic. She is a composite character of Tony Stone, Connie Morgan, Mamie Peanut Johnson, and she doesn't, as all of the characters are, doesn't represent one of those players, but she represents and shows very clearly in the TV show what life was like in this sort of upstairs, downstairs view of not only baseball, but society. Max in the TV show, as you saw in that little clip, an amazing ball player. But of course, as the guy said, this is a, quote, American League, meaning, of course, to be American, you have to be white. And apparently, that's our code word, right? Well, this is an American League, so we can't have you playing. In terms of the sexuality, issues of sexuality, in the 1940s and 50s, there was some loosening of the laws, not officially, but some loosening of context and laws around homosexuality during the war. It was folks were a little more likely to turn their head, I guess, but it was dangerous. It was dangerous. If you have seen the TV show, if you've seen episode 6, and I am telling you, it is one of the best episodes of television I have ever seen in my 65 years. It was brilliant, and it was gut-wrenching, and it was just an awful hard thing to watch when the gay bar got raided. I'm not going to give it away a whole lot, but suffice it to say, yes, that was real. That was realistic. In fact, it's based on a real story from a former ball player. And so, it was dangerous. Literally, you could lose your job, you could lose your life. The violence, particularly directed at women who were perceived to be perverts. Rape was generally the first violent act perpetrated against them. It was part of the history. The TV show brought that in. They showed, yeah, they're not just all out going and having a drink and dancing, but they took their lives into their own hands to go do that. Now, you know, we have always, beyond the TV show, there's always been this stereotype of, those masculine women that play softball. In fact, Philip Wrigley, when he created the All-American League, was so concerned about those masculine softball players that's why he implemented first of all, they had to play in a dress, and then they had to wear makeup and had all of that. They did not want those women to seem masculine, but that's been a stereotype forever. When I was growing up in the 1970s, we were called softball dykes. And I mean, that hasn't changed. And one of the things that this movie does, this TV show does, it shows how much things have changed, but then in a way, how much they haven't. It shows us that women, regardless of class, regardless of race, regardless of sexuality, often will do anything to be on that baseball diamond, to be on that soccer field, or whatever it is. So the questions about this TV show, is it pandering to a quote woke audience, which is one of the criticisms, or is it daring to shatter what many of us already know? And that is that both societally and in baseball, we live and breathe this through the lens of myth. And I think they are attempting to shatter those myths. The myth that baseball is for men, the myth that it's for white men, the myth that women aren't good ball players, or that it doesn't really matter whether or not there might be a few women hidden in the closet, literally and figuratively, who quote like each other. That's just not real. That's something we don't need to talk about. And that is one of the things, bringing this all the way back to my story of the folks that I met this morning at Starbucks. When I said, that's history, that's also real. One of the things that the woman said to me was, well, I think what they're doing and what homosexuals are doing is trying to elevate their status, trying to elevate how important they are by pretending there are more of them than there really are. Well, one of the things that, now I did not say this to her, but one of the things that I think this show does is it says, look, there were, for example, there was a Black trans man in that show who lived a happy life. He was married. He was a productive member of society. Oh my God. There were female ball players. There were these ball players who were actually really good at playing baseball. They became friends. They went out and danced together. They went and had a beer together. And yes, they fell in love with one another. That, images of that on a screen, images of all of that on a screen, is life-changing. When I sat in that theater in 1992 and I saw for the first time women playing baseball, my life has not ever been the same. But that is from a white middle-class 1992 perspective. And now I get all over social media, all kinds of email from students. Oh my God, I see myself. I see myself in this TV show. I see myself as a female athlete. I see that it's okay, that it was hard for people, but it's okay. And yes, of all things, yes, it is historically accurate. that's all I've gotten. I'm happy to, I wanted this to be a discussion if you guys have questions or things you'd like to add.
Can we just chime in, or should we go through?
I don't know, whoever's in charge.
Jessica, you want to lead the charge with pulling up? Jackie?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Jude, if you want to go ahead and start the discussion, go for it.
Thank you. I want to point out, I mean, I loved it. I saw the whole thing. Uncle Bert is like the most amazing character I've ever seen on TV or movies. I thought it was really interesting that one of the characters estimate that 35% of the league is queer, when Maybelle herself said she thought it was 65. So the show is actually totally underplaying what one of the actual players said, and yet people are saying, oh, they're showing it too much. It wasn't really that much, or it didn't. I love that there were no lesbians in the 1940s. That's such a brilliant, stupid, Adam and Eve, there was lesbians like right after that, right after that, maybe even Eve, right? It's so ridiculous. But I just thought it was interesting that the show chose to underplay. Obviously, Maybelle must have said the same thing to them. So they chose to underplay it significantly in anticipation of the criticism. And yet this criticism is still there because in these people's minds, it's 0%. It has to be 0 for me to maintain my sanity.
Right. Well, let me tell you, and that's a good observation, but let me just say something. They were told by Maybelle probably 65%. They were told by other people different amounts. They were actually told by some ball players that there were 0 lesbians in the league, 0. So I don't think they were trying to pull any punches. I think, there's no way to really know for sure, but it's interesting that you noticed that. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah.
Do you think that the players that were reporting on that, of like that 0%, there's no way that they were lesbian in the league, are kind of talking to that very brief comment that I made as well, of like they were just used to being silent and going, this is what society has said of us. We were meant to be feminine. So clearly there couldn't be, especially if I didn't see it with my own 2 eyes.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think that also since the 92 movie came out and the women of the league and the league itself was elevated to a popular status, and people before that didn't even know it existed. And so I think there is a vested interest in maintaining a level of quote respectability. And so I think that is one of the reasons that we're going to see that downplay a little bit, but it's hard to know because, as we said, people just didn't talk about it.
Carrie, do you want to share your thoughts too?
Perry, are you there?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to, okay. Yeah, Kat, your point about highlighting the aspects of what Penny Marshall couldn't really feature in her film because of the times and the attitudes during which she made the film, it just wouldn't have worked back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole point of the film is that it struck a chord in so many millions of people worldwide, right. And was so popular and the highest grossing film about baseball ever made. And Penny Marshall I'm sure she had a sense of that. She must have.
Oh,
And that she left those windows open for the exploration of what she knew she couldn't highlight in her film,
mhm,
which was, to me, it's the most beautiful gift that
mhm,
she did that. She inserted those scenes. And
mhm.
she used them out of more than 4 hours of footage that she had
Yeah.
to edit down to make it palatable for people going to watch it. And she did that, but she put that scene in there, and the scene on the bus where Rosie O'Donnell tears up the picture of her boyfriend and says, I think, I felt like I was different until now, and now I think I'm okay. I think
Mhm.
we're all okay. And those scenes are what impelled Will Graham and Abby Jacobson to take those two things. And to me, the other one is the motif about the Black women playing baseball for industrial league teams.
Right.
And once I understood that, Max and Esther are out there doing it, I thought, to me, because like I used to think as an umpire, I used to think I can't be the only one, even
Yeah.
though back when I started, I always was. But those three things. And then I read on Twitter that Will had a team doing this absolutely massive amount of research into that very thing that has just kind of jarred me out of my slumber, realizing that, oh my gosh, there were probably a lot of Black women back during World War II who were playing baseball.
Right.
And I want to know about them. I want to learn all about them. And I think that's such a wonderful thing that they have done, restoring the narrative to the people who lived it and who deserve to be able to tell it
Mhm.
the way people tell it, from their own perspective, and instead of from somebody else's perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Perry. I will say that it's my understanding that Abby and Will both talked to Penny Marshall before she passed away. And they were very clear about their interpretation, and I think she gave them her blessing. Penny Marshall, you can't say enough about what she did in that movie, with that movie, and then ultimately with the actual women from the league. She was instrumental in a lot of ways in that organization. And times are different, and Will and Abby and the rest of the cast and crew could dig into something and seeing, I have heard from so many young people, particularly seeing themselves portrayed, whether it's butch women, whether it's trans, seeing themselves portrayed in that way, in a positive light,
Yes.
is absolutely earth-shattering.
Oh, the best
life-changing.
moment in the film, in the whole series for me, is when Max is talking to Birdie, and Birdie is congratulating her for, finding her way and being able to fulfill one of her dreams. And Max says to her, "What about you? What's your dream?" And Birdie does this little sort of curtsy in her regalia, her beautiful custom-made suit that she's so happy to be wearing and to feel outside like she feels inside. And oh my gosh, that one moment to me is just so beautiful and powerful.
Right.
And I love it. I love everything about it.
And the last thing, I know we're out of time, but the one thing that thinking about scenes or quotes from the movie, the one thing that ties all this together for me is the scene where Max and Carson are sitting drinking a beer together, just the two of them, beside the field where Max played. And they're talking about baseball. And Max says something to the effect of, "I'd rather have 5 minutes of this than a lifetime of what came before." And if that doesn't make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, and that means opportunities to play baseball, it means a level of acceptance for your sexuality, and I think that's one of the things that is brilliant about the TV show.
Bravo.
We got plenty of time, Kat, so there's no need to cut off the conversation at all. We put in plenty of time for this, so.
Okay, and I am happy to chat about this as much or as little as you guys want. I could have gone on and on and on. I am not ashamed to say I am a big fan of the show. Along with Leslie and certainly others, we worked with them early on some of the history, and I know Leslie could probably speak more directly to the issues concerning race and the Negro Leagues. But I think because the backlash, the reason I wanted to do this discussion is the backlash, the thing they go to, the thing that detractors go to is that's not historically accurate. That's not history. That's not real. And that's why I had this conversation. That's why I started the way I did about this concept, this issue, this way of looking at history. When you peel back the layers and you look at the different perspectives, yeah, it was real. Yes, it was historically accurate. And this is still a TV show, right? I'm not saying every element, every person, every quote was historically accurate, but to actually have someone in the year 2022 look me square in the face and say, were there lesbians in 1940? Well, where the hell did we come from? I mean, I think if nothing else, the show gives us that opportunity for discussion, and more than anything, I think, and largely for younger people, they see some of themselves on the screen, the representation on the screen. I think that's crucial.
There's a question in the chat from Maureen that says, what do you hope that the show does to the folks like the ones from this morning at Starbucks? And do you think that art will be able to elevate the truth to eventual acceptance?
Well, that's a good question. If you had asked me, what did I hope the show would do for people like the ones at Starbucks, I would have had a different answer a few hours ago. But I hope that it gives those who are willing to sit through even one episode. And by the way, these people had not seen the show. I just want to be clear. But if they sit through even one episode, and allow themselves to open up to the fact that maybe not everything has or should be told through the lens of whiteness, of heterosexuality, of an early or mid 20th century definition of normal. And so if you start to just chip away a little bit, and you start to think, okay, well, maybe, so that would be the thing. And I've already forgotten the second half of that question.
It was, do you think that art will be able to elevate the truth to eventual acceptance?
You know what? I think art always does that. And I don't think it will happen overnight in the same way that it hasn't in the past. And I don't know if it's this show or if this show's a stepping stone or what, but I think, because basically, despite all outward appearances, I'm an optimist. And I think that, I think it will, I think it can.
Perry, did you have something else?
Yes. I just want to point out that there are so many little touches in the series that are homages to the film.
Yeah.
I love that when I recognize them, the scene where, Shantae catches the ball that's thrown hard back to her.
Right.
And, but the one that I'm pretty sure that wasn't from the film, but that Will probably got from Justine Siegel, And if anybody has any knowledge about this, please add. The pie giving motif where Carson first gives the manager the pie and then gives Max the pie in the factory. She goes to the factory and gives her the pie. I think he must have gotten that from Justine, from the incident where she has talked about publicly when she was being shunned by the team that she was coaching as the first woman to coach a professional baseball team, the Brockton Rocks, and they treated her very shabbily. And her response was to bake brownies for them and take them to the clubhouse. They banned her from the clubhouse. So she waited at the clubhouse door and offered them brownies. And that was
Amazing.
her peaceable response. Yeah. So I love thinking about that this blend of, historical accuracy and what they got from talking to people like you and Justine and Maybelle, that they wouldn't have been able to include if they hadn't really, done the right thing and not just looked at books and writings and things like that, but talk to the people like you. And thank you for keeping them on the right path.
Oh, believe me, I did very little.
I know, because I saw them. They were like puppy dogs following you around for 5 years.
Well, now I follow them around.
Yeah, me too.
Possible.
So
there was one thing that was unrealistic, and it doesn't matter one bit, and that is that they were playing softball in the very beginning, and both the movie and the show have them playing full baseball from the very first second.
That's exactly
but it's not necessary to include that because that's the least important factor of this whole show.
Yep.
Right?
But you're right, Jude. That's exactly right. Yep. Kate?
I don't know about your interactions with others that have seen the show, especially in the queer community, but if you have those types of interactions, being the optimist you say you are, do you think that kind of backlash has been difficult for some in the queer community that got to feel so represented and so seen in those 8 episodes just to be reminded that people like to pretend that their history doesn't exist?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's well, let me answer it this way. I think it's got to be hard, right? It's always, if nothing else, it's like, you're up here, you're high, you're excited, and it's like someone, poked the balloon, right? But you know what else I think it does, Kate? And this goes to the question about, can art change things? One of the things I think it does, though, is strengthen the resolve of those people, right? Now, not everyone, obviously, is going to deal with that kind of pushback, that opposition. Not everyone is going to deal with that in the same way. But I really think it's important that I think the important thing is that in seeing yourself represented and the strength that gives you, it doesn't mean it's always going to be easy from there on out, but I think that they're taking, a lot of people anyway, are taking that and using it as empowerment, and they're using it to move beyond the best way they can. But again, this incident this morning is a perfect example of that, right? I mean, I'm all high. It's been this great week in Rockford, and there's all this stuff going on, and the conference is awesome. And I'm like, I'm ready to go. And then I'm sitting there thinking, what? but I do think, though, that sometimes seeing yourself, being part of something is important. The hashtag that they keep using, A League of Their Own, is find your team. Find your team. That's a thread that runs through this show that is absolutely crucial. And Shaw found her team, right? A lot of those women found their team. And in fact, that's a phrase often used in the 70s and 80s, yeah, we play on the same team. Well, yeah. And so I think there's strength in that.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, coming from where I know the history, I have experienced the history, I've studied it, you know, it was a little easier to kind of take those jabs a little bit. But I also think that those jabs and that pushback also encouraged us. I know with the IWBC and a lot of the social media that we've been working on to share, and Will Graham did this as well. He has an amazing set of threads actually that go into those details and be like, if you don't believe us, like, here is the historical evidence that we were building on. And you know, thankfully, a lot of the interactions with the queer community that I've had have been with people that are well established there. But you know, it's got to be hard. Again, like, first off, the audacity of people bringing something like that up to a complete stranger, you know, at a Starbucks in a morning.
Yeah.
And if you're not comfortable with yourself,
Right.
you know, how that has to feel.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for mentioning that, because that's actually something that I thought about. I thought, you know, this makes me angry. It's frustrating. It's sad. But, you know, I'm not 19 and coming out. I'm not, you know, 25 and still trying to figure out what's going on in my life, right? Or, you know, and so you get a little bit of excitement, you get a little bit of energy from the show or from whatever, and then that happens, and yeah, I think then it's kind of, you know, one step forward, two steps back. And so honestly, if these people have to act that way, then I'm just as soon it was with me. Yeah. Because you know, I think you're right. It is hard, as awesome as it is to see those representations. You know, it's always going to be a back and forth, and that's sad, right? I mean, it's sad, but damn, you know, here's this incredible show, and we should find out in the next couple of weeks if they're going to renew for a second season. And
I think they did just a couple of days ago. I think they
no,
found out.
They haven't.
No, they still don't know.
Oh, that was a rumor. Okay.
Yeah, they still don't know. But the reality is, you know, let's hope they do. But the reality is, even if they don't, it's out there, right? And it's, those stories are out there, and we can back those stories up. And that's the historian in me, right? I mean, yes, they're historically accurate. When I'm told by strangers, or anyone else for that matter, but especially strangers, who that these things are not historically accurate, you know, it kind of causes me to twitch. But the thing is, most people don't know any of the history that's below the surface, whether we're talking about race, sexuality, gender, labor history, whatever it is. Most of us know that surface stuff. And so when you start dipping below that, and you pull those layers apart and you go, whoa, you know, that's the excitement of history. And that's what most of us don't know. So in a sense, it's okay that people are surprised, right? But it's there, and it's real, and it still is. It's not just this thing from the 1940s and 50s. Leslie, is that you with your little yellow hand up?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I just wanted to sort of take a slightly different, and, you know, talking about the historical importance of all of this, and seeing, and this hashtag that they've got of finding your team. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is, it's also pointed out the difficulty of finding that team when you're talking about Max and bringing up the issue of race.
Right.
And so it tackles something that, as you pointed out, people don't know a great deal about, and all they see, if they know anything, is the Tony, Connie, Mamie kind of story, right? But it's a much bigger story than that. And so the film brings out, without giving away what we all hope, where Max goes and all of that, that is a story that is a much bigger story, and it captures, it brings out more than obviously what Penny Marshall could do in the original film, but still much more to be done there in just pointing out the difficulties for women as a whole when you bring in women of color, and the idea that that story is a much bigger one. And again, people will say, did that really happen? Are there women that were playing? And the answer is yes, and many more than just the 3 that we know about. And so that's an interest. It opens up that, as often these things do, right? You hope that it, if nothing else, it opens up the conversation to be able to talk about all of these on a much greater depth than you ever could, because you've introduced it in a way that, yes, to some, like those people you met this morning, is uncomfortable. And then to others, it opens it up in a way that makes it more comfortable to talk about.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think the show also does a really good job of teasing that it's going to break that surface and then surprising you that it breaks it even more. Because, like, I feel like most people went into the show knowing that it was going to address something about race and something about sexuality. But what you actually end up getting is so much more representation than you could have ever hoped for in so many different ways. You know, so I stated in the chat a little bit ago, like, Uncle Bert is my favorite character because it's not a character I ever thought I would see on television. And even though, like, I am very steadfast in being out and being proud of who I am, there was something about being able to see a transmasc person at the point I am in my journey to understand that, yes, like, of course, cognitively, I've known that those stories exist, but where I am in my journey really needed to see that.
Right.
To be like, yes, like, I'm building on this. I have more opportunities because people like this existed.
Right.
And those were not stories that I expected to see, even though I knew the show was going to address things we weren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And Leslie, I was gonna say something to what you just said, Kate, but I want to go back because God knows I'll forget it. Leslie, what you were saying about, in some ways it's challenging what people know or think they know about race and about segregation. And again, I brought up Jim Crow, that kind, it's challenging, but it's more than that too. It's about the fact that, as you say, if people know any name of a Black woman in baseball, likely it's Toni Stone, right? I mean, and you got Connie Morgan and Mamie and there are others, but it's probably one of those 3, likely Toni Stone. So one of the things that happens is, like, I mean, in the last presentation, we were talking about the Philadelphia Dolly Vardens. But let's strip that away, right? There are women and girls like Max who they never played in any kind of organized game. Or, I mean, like a semi-professional or anything. I mean, so.
Yeah, there was no league for them.
Yes, there's no league, right? There was no league. And those of us who played ball pre-Title IX, there was no league, right? It was, and that's the beauty of this game. That's the beauty of what, first of all, IWBC is trying to do. It's, yes, there are professionals. There are people who have played in semi or umpired or whatever, it's semi-professionally, but millions and millions of women and people of color have been part of this game on levels that we have no clue about. And they are every bit as important to the history of baseball as the professionals are. And so ultimately the TV show can only do so much with that. But to get to your point, it's like, not only do we just I don't know, we shatter myth, but it's also, wow, this sort of light bulb moment, right? And I think that's brilliant. And anytime we can do that, and especially anytime art can do that, then it's a win. It's a win. Kate, I totally forgot what I was going to say to your comment. Oh, no, I didn't. Now I remember. Well, I mean, I did, but now I don't. So you were talking about, like, even though you are, you feel comfortable with who you are and where you are in the world. It's not like you're one of those 16, 17-year-olds that's still coming to grips with your sexuality or your life or your representation or anything else. I just wanted to say, I'm 65 and I am an old broken down jock. I have been married to the same woman for 15 years. I have, gone through all of that, right? But watching Max say to Carson, give me 5 minutes of this, then a lifetime of what came before. It brought me to my knees. I mean, and I think there's a way that people moving through their own process needs to see that representation. But everybody needs to be reaffirmed. And how many times, they're turning a double play and Jess jumps up in the air and grabs the ball and I'm 20 again. I'm 20. And when Jess and Lupe are sitting there together, best buds, drinking a beer with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth, that was me and my wingman, right? And we were at the Ladies' Choice in Louisville, Kentucky. And yes, I saw that. I felt that again in a way that I hadn't in a long time. And so I think representation is important on a lot of levels. And that to me is one of the things that's so brilliant about the show.
Anybody else have any other questions? Got a couple more minutes.
Somebody mentioned about a language barrier.
Yeah, I think that was Tara.
Yeah, I just I've only seen the pilot, so but I mean I was just sort of struck by that first scene where I think she was Cuban, right? And she walks on and she's just like, habla español until she found someone who actually could speak back to her. And I'm sure that's a model on like Lefty, Alvarez and people who just came and didn't know anything, but that part really hit me because it's like, well, of course there'd be, people who didn't speak it, it seemed like one of these things that also, for obvious reasons, Penny Marshall left out of the movie, just the fact that there were people there who weren't necessarily American and had to fit it in that way. There were these, I mean, they mentioned in the song, like, international. So it's interesting how they, I liked how they worked that in there. I will be watching the rest of the show at some point.
Good. I'm glad. And yes, I think
at the time.
I know the stories, the interviews that I did with Lefty for my book on her. They were painful. It was Lefty was 15 when she came to the U.S. and she spoke no English. She ate hamburgers for every meal because that was the only word she knew. She would never have said a bad word about anybody in that league. But the stories were clearly stories of harassment and hazing, and not all of them, but some of them. And it's pretty painful. It's pretty painful. And I'm really glad that they've done that they're using, that they're really looking at that role. And of course, Lefty was not the only Cuban. There were 4 Cuban women, and then there were a couple of women who were from Mexico or who were Mexican American. So there was a Latina presence in the league. But thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's also another representation, right? It's also another way of looking at this and expanding it, and that the TV show can do that, whereas Penny couldn't.
I think the TV format really suits this story too, because like you say, you know, a movie is not good for character development, but a TV show is perfect for that. And the relationships that keep shifting and deepening is really beautiful. And again, we've never really seen that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I can't even imagine if they get the second season, I can't even imagine where the storyline is going. But I hope they do. And this is exactly when I proposed this to Leslie to have this conversation. This is exactly what I wanted, not a presentation, but a little bit of my own thoughts and then a discussion about it, because I think the very best thing that this or any other show or movie can do is spark this kind of insight and discussion. And because of the times that we live in now in this country and the ways in which issues of race and sexuality particularly, it can be scary, right? It can be really scary. And so I appreciate everyone, your feedback. And if you had not watched all 8 episodes, go do so. And believe me, I am not getting paid to say that. It's just that good.
All right. This was, and you're seeing in the chat, yes, discussions of can this discussion go on, Lisa, at 9 and things like that. I think the answer is absolutely. David says yes. Cool.
Yes. David, let me know, dude. I'm happy to do it.
This has been marvelous all day today. We've had incredible presentations, incredible discussion, and we're not done. And so we are taking a break though, so everybody can stretch, get a chance to maybe get outside, do whatever you want to do. And then we're going to be coming back at 6:30. And again, that is Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to have our title panel at 6:30 that Kat will be moderating with Mabel Blair, Justine Siegel, and Sarah Dolman. So we're looking at that whole issue of Title IX across the generations. And then we will have 2 presentations after that to unveil the IWBC's newest pylon design, and then the presentation of the Dorothy Seymour Mills Lifetime Achievement Award. And so those will both be done tonight as well. And so
don't miss it.
We want you to come back, enjoy your break, but we want you to come back at 6:30. And so thank you to all our presenters, to our hosts, Tracy and Jessica this afternoon. And we really appreciate everybody's participation and wonderful presentations. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you again at 6:30.